18 years ago, Detective David Carter lost everything in the span of 11 seconds. His toddler son Lucas vanished from a parking lot, leaving behind only a Spider-Man Band-Aid and a security tape showing a stranger leading him away by the hand. Now, a faded birthmark in a magazine photo sends David on a collision course with a nightmare. His child is alive, raised by another family, and has no memory of him. But the deeper David digs, the more he unravels a sinister network hiding in plain sight, one that will kill to protect its secrets. As past and present collide, David must decide how far a father should go to reclaim a son who doesn't know he's lost. The truth waits where no one thought to look, and it wears a familiar face. June 14, 2013, Chicago, IL. 5:03 p.m., Sunshine Kids Daycare parking lot. The last thing David Carter remembered was the sound of his son's laughter, bright, bubbling, the kind that made strangers turn and smile. 3-year-old Lucas had just barreled into his legs, sticky fingers clutching a crayon-smeared drawing. "Look, Daddy, a dinosaur, it's you!" The paper was a mess of green scribbles, but David had grinned, ruffling the boy's chestnut curls. "Scariest T-Rex I've ever seen, buddy." Now that laughter was gone. The phone call had lasted 11 seconds. 11 seconds. His partner's voice crackling through the Bluetooth. "Dave, we got a lead on the Garza case." David had turned away just for a moment to snap, "Not now, I'm with Lou." The parking lot was empty. No small figure in the Spider-Man backpack, no tiny sneakers scuffing asphalt, just the drawing, fluttering to the ground like a leaf. 5:70 p.m., surveillance tape, camera Nürgeforden. The cops replayed it 3 times, each viewing carved deeper into David's ribs. Frame 1, Lucas, swaying by the car, swinging his lunchbox. Frame 2, a gray hoodie entering shot-broad shoulders, gloved hands. Frame 3, the stranger crouching, saying something. Lucas tilting his head, then, trustingly, slipping his small hand into the man's. No struggle, no scream, just a quiet walk toward a van with no plates. Detective Ruiz paused the tape. "You recognize him? A disgruntled parent, maybe? Ex-con?" David's fingers dug into the desk. The man's face was a blur, but the way he moved, practiced, like he'd done this before. Somewhere in Chicago, a clock ticked. Somewhere, Lucas was breathing air that didn't belong to his father. And all because of 11 seconds. June 15, 2013, Chicago Police Department, 5:22 a.m. The coffee in David's hand had gone cold 3 hours ago. He didn't remember pouring it. Didn't remember the burn when he'd gulped it too fast, too hot, trying to shock himself awake. The precinct's fluorescent lights buzzed like wasps, bleaching the color from everything except the photo taped to the caseboard. Lucas, mid-giggle, frosting smeared on his chin from last week's birthday cake. Detective Ruiz slapped a file onto the table. "We ran the van through traffic cams. Disappears near the I-90 interchange. Could be Indiana by now." His voice was careful, the way cops talk to family when they're already writing the obituary in their heads. David's thumb rubbed the edge of his badge still clipped to his belt, though they'd told him to go home. "You're too close to this, Carter." Across the room, 2 uniforms whispered by the coffee maker. One glanced at him, then away. A familiar itch crawled up his spine, the same look he'd gotten when Internal Affairs investigated him last year. Suspicion. Ruiz cleared his throat. "We need to ask. Anyone got a grudge against you? Recent arrests? Custody disputes?" "Jesus," David's chair screeched as he stood. "You think I—" A phone rang. 6:15 a.m., evidence room. The security footage from the gas station 2 blocks away glowed on the monitor. Grainy, black and white, timestamp blinking. 06:14, 2013, 17:09, Fort Threes. The van, clearer now. David leaned in, his pulse hammering in his teeth. The driver's window was down. A forearm rested on the frame and there, just visible, a tattoo. Ruiz froze the frame. That's a military insignia. 101st Airborne. David's breath hitched. The Garza case. 3 weeks ago, he'd arrested a decorated vet for armed robbery. The guy had stared him down in the interrogation room and hissed, "You got kids, officer? Watch them real close." The room tilted. Ruiz was already dialing. "We'll pull his file, see if—" David was out the door before he finished. His keys were in the ignition when his phone lit up. Unknown number. A text. No words, just a photo. A small hand, palm up. Lucas's Spider-Man Band-Aid peeling at the edge. Then deleted. June 15, 2013, 11:37 a.m., Cook County Jail. The visitation room smelled of bleach and stale sweat. David's knuckles whitened around the file folder as the guard led in the inmate Mason Crow, 38, convicted of forgery, released June 7th. Crow moved like smoke, thin, unremarkable, but his eyes locked onto David's badge with the intensity of a man who'd spent years learning how to disappear. "You're wasting time," Crow said before David could speak. His voice was sandpaper soft. "Garza's got nothing to do with this." David slid the gas station photo across the table. The tattooed arm. "You shared a cell for 8 months. Tell me he never talked about kids." A flicker in Crow's left eyelid. The guard shifted by the door. Crow leaned forward, chains rattling. "He drew pictures," he whispered. "Not of his kids, other people's. 12:03 p.m., interrogation room. B." The sketchbook hit the table with a slap. Ruiz flipped through pages of pencil drawings, dozens of them. Playgrounds, backyards, all with the same subject. Little boys, 3-5 years old, caught mid-laugh or squinting in sunlight. David's stomach turned to lead. "Found it in Garza's storage unit," Ruiz muttered. "No photos, just these. Like he was—" "Practicing," David finished. His phone buzzed, another unknown number. This time, a voice recording. 2 seconds of static, then, "Daddy," Lucas's voice, sleepy, confused. A metallic clang cut it off. Ruiz grabbed the phone. "We can trace—" "No." David's throat tightened. "They're using burners. They know the drill." Across the room, the sketchbook lay open to a fresh page. A boy with chestnut curls. Spider-Man backpack. And beneath it, in Garza's jagged handwriting, "Easy target. Cops never look close." June 15, 2013, 3:18 p.m., U-Store IT Facility, West Belmont. The padlock snapped open with a hollow clank that echoed through the concrete corridor. Unit 214 smelled of mildew and something sharper ammonia, maybe, like someone had tried to scrub away memories. Ruiz swept his flashlight beam across stacked plastic bins. "Jesus," he muttered. David's pulse hammered in his temples as the light caught the contents. A red hoodie, size 4T, a Ziploc bag of animal crackers, Lucas's favorite, Polaroids of playgrounds taped to the wall in a grid. But it was the ledger that stopped David's breath. Page after page of handwritten entries. June 3rd, Sunshine Kids Daycare, male, 3 years blonde, too loud. June 10th, Little Sprouts Preschool, female, 4 year, mother present. June 14th, target acquired. Ruiz radioed for CSI, his voice tight. "We've got a staging ground." David's fingers trembled as he turned the page. The last entry. Delivery to SR 615. No contact after. 3:42 p.m. Parking lot. The summer heat pressed down like a sweaty palm as David paced near his car. "SR Sarah Reed. It has to be." His voice cracked. "We're wasting time with—" His phone rang. No number, just a text. "Check your trunk." The blood drained from David's face. Ruiz already had his Glock drawn as they approached the car. The trunk release creaked. Inside, Lucas's stuffed dinosaur, Mr. Snappy, and a note in cut-out magazine letters. Stop looking or he cries. June 15, 2013, 6:03 p.m., Rural Route 12, Wisconsin. The GPS had stopped working 10 miles back. Now David's Crown Vic bounced down a dirt road lined with corn stalks that stood like silent sentinels in the fading light. Ruiz gripped the dashboard as they hit another pothole. "Last registered address for Sarah Reed," Ruiz said, squinting at the farmhouse ahead. "But according to tax records, this place belongs to John and Miriam Kessler," David finished, the name from the property records, the same Kesslers who'd bought the farm at auction 3 years ago. Cash payment. The porch light flickered as they approached. David's hand hovered near his service weapon. Something about the way the curtains twitched too quick, too deliberate, set his teeth on edge. The door opened before they could knock. Miriam Kessler stood framed in the doorway, flour dusting her apron. "Can I help you, officers?" Her smile didn't reach her eyes. 6:17 p.m., the kitchen. The farmhouse kitchen smelled of apple pie and something underneath bleach, maybe. David's gaze caught on the fridge. A child's drawing held up by a strawberry magnet. Stick figures. A smiling sun. Ruiz cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we're looking for Sarah Reed. This was her last known address." Miriam's knuckles whitened around her rolling pin. "Oh, Sarah. She rented our guest house out back. Moved out last month, though." A floorboard creaked overhead. David's head snapped up. "Someone else home?" "Just my husband," Miriam said too quickly. "John's been laid up with the flu." Through the window, David saw a flicker of movement near the barn. A small figure darting between the hay bales. 6:29 p.m., the barn. The smell of dry hay and motor oil hit them as they pushed open the barn doors. Dust motes swirled in the late afternoon sun. Then David saw them. Tiny footprints in the dirt, leading to a trap door hidden beneath a pile of feed sacks. Ruiz radioed for backup as David yanked the door open. Wooden stairs descended into darkness. The air that wafted up was damp, cold, and then a sound that stopped David's heart, a child's whimper. Not Lucas, but as his eyes adjusted, he saw them. 3 little boys, maybe 4 to 5 years old, huddled in a makeshift crib, their eyes wide with fear. On the wall behind them, a map of the Midwest dotted with red pins, and a fresh newspaper clipping, "Chicago Cop's Son Missing. 24 hours and counting." June 15, 2013, 7:12 p.m., Kessler Farmhouse. Backup still 20 minutes out, David crouched by the trap door, listening to the muffled sobs below. His service weapon felt heavy in his hand. Ruiz emerged from the farmhouse, face grim. "Found this in their bedroom." He held up a leather-bound ledger. The pages were filled with entries in neat cursive. Delivery from Chicago, $15,000. Indianapolis client prefers blondes, Milwaukee pickup, no birthmarks. David's blood turned to ice. This wasn't just about Lucas. They'd stumbled onto something much bigger. A shadow moved across the yard. John Kessler, shotgun in hand, emerged from the cornfield. "Thought I told Miriam not to answer the door," he growled. The first gunshot sent the crows screaming into the twilight. October 12, 2023, Cedar Ridge High School baseball field, Iowa, 4:17 p.m. The aluminum bleachers vibrated with the stomping of parents as the pitcher wound up. David Carter hadn't sat through a Little League game in 10 years, not since the summer before Lucas vanished. Now, the scent of popcorn and freshly cut grass hit him like a gut punch. His hands clenched around the magazine in his lap, the one with the grainy photo of Jacob Reed at bat, his swing identical to Lucas's toddler habit of sticking out his tongue in concentration. The birthmark, barely visible under his cap, was the same violet smudge Lucas had gotten from his great-grandmother. "Number 12, Jacob Reed," the announcer's voice crackled over the speakers. David's breath caught. The boy loped toward home plate, cleats kicking up red dust. 13 years old now, but David would have known that posture anywhere. The slight hunch of the shoulders when nervous, the way he tapped the bat twice against his shoes. "Just like you taught him," a voice whispered in his mind. That last game at Grant Park, Lucas swinging at dandelions more than balls. 4:23 p.m., third inning. David edged down the bleachers, heart hammering. Up close, Jacob's profile was sharper than in the magazine. The baby fat had melted into angled cheekbones, but when he wiped sweat from his forehead, David saw it. The scar from Lucas's stitches at age 2. Fell off the jungle gym. Screamed bloody murder until I promised him Spider-Man Band-Aids. A woman's laugh cut through his thoughts. Sarah Reed leaned against the chain-link fence, her sun-bleached ponytail swinging as she cheered. "Eye on the ball, Jakey." The term of affection made David's jaw tighten. Jacob fouled a pitch. As he stepped out of the batter's box, his gaze flickered past the crowd and locked onto David. For one suspended second, the world narrowed. David saw no spark of recognition, just the polite confusion of a kid scanning faces for his real family. Then Jacob turned away, adjusting his glove like David was just another stranger in the stands. A hand gripped David's elbow. "You're either very brave or very stupid." Detective Ruiz materialized beside him, sunglasses hiding his eyes. "We've got 2 unmarked cars watching the Reed's house. If you spook them—" "He tapped his bat twice," David interrupted, voice raw. "Lucas always did that." Beyond the fence, Sarah Reed was now staring directly at them. Her smile had frozen into something sharp and calculating. She murmured to a man in a coach's cap, John Kessler, who immediately started toward the bleachers. Ruiz yanked David backward. "We need to go, now!" As they retreated, David glanced back. Jacob was watching them leave, his forehead creased in a frown. Then Sarah Reed stepped between them, blocking his view, her hand possessively on her son's shoulder. October 13, 2023, 9:08 a.m., Reed family home, Cedar Ridge, Iowa. The porch swing creaked under Sarah Reed's weight as she sipped her coffee, steam curling around a face that had clearly once been pretty in a conventional, cheerleader way. Now, at 42, her skin had the leathery tan of someone who spent summers watching Little League from bleachers, and her eyes, a flat, unremarkable brown, flickered over David with the practiced calm of a woman who'd rehearsed this moment. "You're the detective from Chicago." Not a question. She set her mug down on the wicker table between them, where a stack of parenting magazines fanned out beneath a bowl of artificial apples. "Jacob mentioned a man staring at him yesterday. I suppose that was you." David's fingers twitched toward his breast pocket. The photo of Lucas, age 3, mid-laugh on a swing set. Instead, he kept his voice neutral. "Your son has a unique birthmark." A muscle jumped in Sarah's jaw. Behind her, through the screen door, David could see the living room. Sports trophies, a piano with sheet music for Für Elise, too advanced for a beginner, and a wall of framed photos charting Jacob's growth. In every one, the boy's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Vascular birthmark," Sarah said smoothly. "The doctors called it a port wine stain. We've had it treated since he was 5. She reached for a binder on the side table, its cover embossed with Jacob's medical history. "You're welcome to see the records." Too prepared, too clean, David leaned forward. "Where did you adopt him?" "Blessing's Adoption Agency in Indianapolis." Her laugh was a dry rustle, like dead leaves. "Closed down in 2016 after that scandal. You know how these places are. But we got lucky." She flipped open the binder to a notarized document with a gold seal. Jacob was a safe haven baby. Left at a fire station, no known relatives. The dates aligned. The paperwork looked legitimate. But when David touched the page, he noticed what someone less observant might have missed, the slight stickiness near the signature line. Like glue. A thud from inside the house. Jacob appeared in the hallway, backpack slung over one shoulder. Up close, David could see the faint freckles across his nose. Lucas had those too, after that weekend at Lake Michigan and the way he chewed his lower lip when nervous. "Mom, who's—" "Just a salesman, honey." Sarah's voice lifted an octave, sugary. "Your ride's here." Through the window, a yellow school bus idled at the curb. Jacob hesitated, his gaze lingering on David with an unreadable expression. Then he was gone, the screen door slamming behind him like a gunshot. Sarah exhaled through her nose. He's shy around strangers. David pulled out his phone, swiped to a photo of Lucas's Spider-Man Band-Aid, the one from the abduction file. Funny, my son hated strangers too, until they offered him these. For the first time, Sarah's fingers trembled. The coffee mug tipped, spilling dark liquid across the adoption papers. As she blotted at the stain, David saw the tattoo peeking from under her sleeve. A tiny lotus flower, just like the one in Garza's sketchbook. October 14th, 2023, 3:42 a.m., former Blessings Adoption Agency, Indianapolis. Rain lashed against the boarded-up windows as David jimmied the rusted lock. The air inside smelled of mildew and something sharper bleach, the kind used to erase evidence. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating water-stained file boxes and a reception desk still littered with faded Happy Adoption Day balloons. Ruiz's voice crackled through his earpiece. "You sure you want to do this without a warrant?" David didn't answer. Warrants took time, and every instinct screamed that Sarah Reed was already packing Jacob into a car headed for Mexico. He kicked aside a collapsed shelf, its labels still visible. 2013-2014. Final placements. The box beneath had been chewed through by rats, but the files inside told their own story, pages torn at the staples, entire sections razored out. Then his light caught something in the corner. A fireproof safe, its door slightly ajar. 4:17 a.m., the ledger. The single intact folder inside was thinner than a hospital bracelet. Jacob Elias Reed. Dob. Oajhuasctor 12-2010. Altered from 2013. Birth mother, Jane Doe, struck through with pen. David's hands shook as he flipped to the back. A notarized certificate listed Dr. Philip Greer as attending physician, the same Greer currently serving 15 years for infant trafficking at Cedar Junction. And in the corner, a stamp with the notary's name, Eleanor Voss. He knew that name. Eleanor Voss had been found floating in the White River 2 months after Blessings closed, her lungs filled with river water and her fingers stained with ink. Suicide, the report said. A sticky note fluttered to the floor. Special delivery for SR Lotus Protocol. The same words from Garza's ledger. 5:02 a.m., the basement. The beam of his flashlight trembled as it revealed what they'd tried to hide. A concrete room with a stainless steel table bolted to the floor. The walls were scrubbed clean, but the drain in the center still held traces of reddish-brown. And then he saw them. Tiny handprints. Dozens pressed into the concrete like macabre fossils. Some no bigger than a toddler's. David's stomach lurched. This wasn't just an adoption agency. It was a processing center. His radio buzzed, Ruiz's voice tight. "David, get out, now. Indy PD just got an anonymous tip about a break-in at..." Sirens wailed in the distance. Too close, too convenient. As he sprinted for the exit, his boot crushed something brittle. A child's hair ribbon, its blue satin still bright against the filth. The exact shade Lucas had been wearing the day he vanished. October 15th, 2023, 2:18 a.m., Cedar Ridge Motel 6. The motel ice bucket rattled as David dumped its contents. Jacob's plastic water cup sat on the bathroom counter, lifted from his school cafeteria 3 hours earlier. Smudged with the boy's fingerprints and the faint imprint of his teeth along the rim. David's hands shook as he swabbed the interior with a Q-tip, the cotton tip turning translucent with saliva. "This is illegal. This is your son." The second thought came unbidden, dangerous in its certainty. He sealed the sample into an envelope addressed to a private lab in Denver, one that didn't ask questions if you paid in cash. 4:33 p.m., the call. David's phone buzzed face down on the rental car dashboard. He'd been parked outside Jacob's school for 2 hours, watching soccer practice through binoculars. The boy moved differently than the other kids, more deliberate, like he was constantly calculating angles. Lucas used to tilt his head just like that when concentrating. "Mr. Carter?" The lab tech's voice was professionally neutral. "Your paternity results came back sooner than expected." A crow slammed into the windshield, leaving a smudge of feathers and blood. David didn't flinch. "And?" "The tested parties share 3,187 out of 3,188 genetic markers. That's a 99.9% probability of—" The phone slipped from David's grip. Through the fogged windshield, he watched Jacob high-five a teammate, his birthmark clearly visible under the October sun. That violet smudge David had kissed every night before bed. The crow twitched once and went still. 6:47 p.m., the confrontation. David intercepted Jacob on his walk home, stepping out from behind an oak tree. The boy froze, backpack straps cutting into his shoulders. "You're that cop." Jacob's voice was deeper than David expected. "The one who keeps staring at me." "I knew a boy once." David kept his hands visible, palms out. He loved Spider-Man Band-Aids and animal crackers, hated when his shoelaces got wet. Jacob's breathing hitched. A flicker of something recognition? Fear darted behind his eyes. "I don't know what you're—" "You tap your bat twice before swinging." David took a careful step forward. "Just like I taught you in Grant Park. Remember the dandelions?" For half a second, Jacob's face crumpled. Then his expression shuddered. "My mom says not to talk to strangers." He backed away, sneakers scraping gravel. "Especially cops with fake stories." But not before David saw it the way Jacob's left thumb unconsciously rubbed his birthmark. The exact same nervous tell Lucas had at 3 years old. October 15th, 2023, 9 to 13 p.m., Reed residence back porch. The swing chain screeched like a wounded animal when Sarah Reed stood up too fast, her lemonade glass shattering on the flagstones. The DNA report fluttered between them, its crisp edges catching the yellow glow of the bug light. "This is some sick joke." Her voice cracked on the last word. "His parents died in a head-on collision near Peoria. I saw the death certificates." David watched her pupils dilate, the telltale flicker of a woman realizing she'd been played. "Check the dates," he said quietly. "Lucas disappeared June 14, 2013. Your paperwork says Jacob was born June 12, 2010. A moth batted itself to death against the hot bulb above them. Sarah's hands trembled as she flipped through the file she'd retrieved from a kitchen safe. David noted the precise location behind the flower canister, exactly where Lucas's mother used to hide Christmas presents. 3 years. Sarah's manicured finger traced the altered birth date. They aged him down so he'd fit the inventory. The word tasted foul. Her gaze darted to the upstairs window where Jacob's shadow moved behind drawn curtains. All this time, I thought. The back door slammed open. Jacob stood barefoot in pajamas, face pale under his freckles. "Mom, why's my name on that?" His eyes locked onto David. "You." The silence that followed was the kind that comes before tornado sirens. Sarah reached for her son. "Honey, we need to—" "You knew." Jacob backed away, voice breaking. "All those times I asked about my real parents, the nightmares. You knew I was stolen." David saw the exact moment Sarah's maternal instinct overrode her guilt. She grabbed Jacob's wrist. "We're leaving. Now." "Like hell you are." David blocked the porch steps, the Glock under his jacket pressed against his ribs. "That boy has a family who's waited 10 years to—" A shotgun pump echoed through the dark. John Kessler stepped from the shadows, barrel leveled at David's chest. "Funny thing about farm country," he drawled. "No neighbors to hear gunshots." Jacob made a sound, half gasp, half sob, as Sarah yanked him behind her. The DNA report crumpled underfoot, its damning percentages ground into the dirt. October 15th, 2023, 11:07 p.m., Cedar Ridge Police Department. The interrogation room smelled of stale coffee and the metallic tang of Sarah Reed's sweat as she picked at her cuffed wrists. Across the table, Detective Ruiz slid a photo across the scratched surface, a younger Sarah, at a lakeside picnic, her arm slung around a broad-shouldered man with a spiderweb tattoo on his neck. "Tell me about your brother, Ms. Reed." Ruiz's voice was deceptively soft. "The late Thomas Mercer." Funny thing is, military records show he was stationed near Chicago in June 2013. David watched through the one-way glass, his reflection superimposed over Sarah's face as it crumpled. The DNA report lay heavy in his pocket. Tommy just showed up that night with a kid. Sarah's voice cracked like thin ice. Said the mother was some junkie who OD'd, that he was saving him. Her chipped nail polish scraped the photo. He knew I'd lost 2 babies. Knew I'd believe him. 11:33 p.m., evidence room. The case file Ruiz handed David made his stomach twist. Mercer's autopsy photos, single gunshot to temple, ruled suicide, bank records showing $15,000 deposits to Sarah's account every June. A faded Polaroid of Lucas asleep in a car seat. Date stamped 3 days post-abduction. David's fingers trembled on the last item. His son's Superman pajamas, the ones he'd vanished in, were visible under a striped blanket Sarah had knitted. The same blanket now folded at the foot of Jacob's bed. "She knew," David whispered. Ruiz exhaled through his nose. "Maybe not at first, but the payments? The altered birth certificate? That's conspiracy." A commotion erupted in the hallway. Jacob. No. Lucas stood flanked by social workers, his birthmark glaring under fluorescent lights. When he saw David, his whole body went rigid. "You." The word was an accusation. "You're the reason she's crying." David reached out, then let his hand drop. "I'm the reason you were taken." The boy flinched as if struck. 11:59 p.m., the revelation. The truth came in jagged pieces. Tommy Mercer had been Garza's army buddy. The Lotus Protocol was their code for high-value abductions. Sarah's farm was just one stop in a network spanning 6 states. But it was the last file that stopped David's heart, a scribbled note in Mercer's handwriting. "Kessler says the cops getting close. Have to move the Chicago package." Dated June 13, 2013, one day before Lucas vanished. October 16, 2023, 3:14 p.m., Cedar Ridge Family Services Center. The visitation room smelled like lemon disinfectant, and the peanut butter sandwich left uneaten on the table between them. Lucas Jacob no longer sat hunched in a borrowed hoodie 3 sizes too big, his fingers tracing the grain of the wooden table, the same way he'd traced the whorls in his high-chair tray a lifetime ago. David counted breaths instead of seconds. 14 years of waiting for this moment, and now all he could focus on was the angry red mark on Lucas's wrist where the handcuff had bitten during Sarah's arrest. "You have my nose." The words slipped out unbidden. Lucas's head jerked up, his birthmark darkened with the flush creeping up his neck. "I don't have anything of yours." The venom in his voice didn't match the way his legs were bouncing. That nervous tell David remembered from toddler tantrums. A caseworker hovered by the door, pretending not to listen. David slid his phone across the table, screen lit with a video paused mid-play. "Just watch. 10 seconds. That's all I'm asking." The footage was shaky, taken at Lucas's 3rd birthday party. A tiny boy in a Spider-Man t-shirt blew out candles, then immediately burst into tears when the smoke detector went off. Lucas's breath hitched. His thumb brushed the screen right over the toddler's face. I remember that." His voice cracked. "The cake was chocolate, but it tasted like burning," David finished softly. "Because your mom. Because Maggie set the oven too high." The correction hung between them. Lucas's fingers crept to his birthmark, pressing like he could push the memories back in. Outside, a car backfired and both of them flinched. Another shared reflex. The caseworker cleared her throat. 5 more minutes. Lucas stood so fast his chair screeched. "I need air." But at the door, he hesitated. Is there more of those videos?" David's heart hammered against his ribs. "Whole hard drives full. Your first steps. The time you finger-painted the dog." He swallowed. "Your mom singing you to sleep." For the first time, Lucas looked at him, really looked. The anger was still there, but underneath, Something fragile trembled. "She's dead, isn't she?" Sarah said, "Car accident, 6 months after you were taken." David watched the lie land, saw Lucas's shoulders tighten. The truth that Maggie had swallowed a bottle of pills after the second anniversary could wait. Lucas nodded once, sharp like he was snapping a thread. "Tomorrow, same time." He yanked the hood over his head, but not fast enough to hide the tear cutting through his birthmark. "Bring the one with the dog." November 7th, 2023, 8:23 p.m. Carter Safe House, undisclosed location. The smell of microwave lasagna and gun oil hung in the air as Lucas, not Jacob, not yet Lucas again, picked at the edges of his bandage. The wound wasn't deep, just a graze from Kessler's men at the extraction, but David still caught him wincing every time he moved his left arm, the same way Maggie used to when her migraines struck. "You should eat something." David nudged the plate closer, careful not to touch. 3 weeks since the reunion, and they still moved around each other like unexploded ordnance. Lucas's fork screeched against the ceramic. "Sarah used to make this from scratch, layers so thin you could read through them." His voice had developed a new rasp since the kidnapping, like something had been torn loose inside. David watched his son's fingers, his long pianist fingers, not Sarah's stubby farmhand's tap out a nervous rhythm on the table. 1, 2, pause. 1, 2, pause. The exact cadence Lucas had used to rock himself to sleep as a toddler. The TV played muted footage of Sarah Reed's arraignment. Lucas hadn't turned it off, hadn't looked away either. "You know," David peeled the label off his beer bottle, "when you were 3, you refused to eat anything green. Called broccoli tiny trees and cried when—" "Stop." Lucas's chair scraped back. "Just fucking stop." He paced to the window, his reflection fractured by the bulletproof film. "You keep throwing these breadcrumbs at me like I'm supposed to remember some magical childhood, but all I see is a stranger describing some other kid." David's phone buzzed. Another text from Ruiz. "Garza's phone records show 22 calls to Kessler in past month. We're close." He silenced it without looking up. Lucas yanked open the fridge, staring at its contents like they might hold answers. The interior light caught the scar on his temple, the one David hadn't recognized at first because it wasn't there when he'd lost him. "I dreamed about you," Lucas said suddenly, not knowing it was you, just this blurry guy who smelled like Old Spice and gunpowder. He slammed the fridge door. "Sarah said it was my dead dad. Made me leave flowers at some bullshit grave, and David was across the kitchen before he realized he'd moved." He stopped just short of touching, hands suspended in the space between them. Lucas didn't flinch. Progress. Outside, a car backfired. Lucas's shoulders tensed, not the full-body flinch from last week. "You don't have to remember," David said quietly. "We've got time to make new—" "Don't." Lucas's laugh was raw. "Don't give me some Hallmark bullshit. I need—" He rubbed his birthmark, the gesture so familiar it stole David's breath. "I need to know why you didn't find me sooner." The clock on the stove ticked through the silence. David reached for the one thing he'd kept hidden, the manila envelope from Internal Affairs. He let it fall between them with a thud. Crime scene photos spilled out. Garza's suicide, with the gun still clutched in his right hand despite the left side entry wound. The coroner's report stamped classified. "Because they made sure I was looking the wrong way," David said. For the first time in 10 years, Lucas held his gaze. Not as a victim, not as a stranger, but as David Carter's son, the one person alive who might understand what came next. December 24th, 2023, 3:47 p.m., Carter Residence, Chicago. The scent of pine needles and fresh paint mingled with the cinnamon rolls baking in the oven, Maggie's recipe, dug out from an old email thread David hadn't opened in years. Lucas knelt by the Christmas tree, carefully hanging the one ornament he'd asked to keep from Sarah's house, a chipped ceramic star with Jacob's First Christmas 2014 scrawled on the back in looping Sharpie. David pretended not to notice the way his son's fingers lingered on the inscription before placing it beside the vintage Star Wars Death Star ornament Lucas had loved as a toddler. 2 histories, 1 tree. You missed a spot. Lucas tossed a wadded-up piece of wrapping paper at him, nodding to the half-decorated mantel where David's attempt at garland hung lopsided. David caught it, the reflexive cop reflexes still sharp even as his hands shook, just slightly, from 3 sleepless nights preparing for today's hearing. Yeah, well, interior design wasn't exactly covered in the academy. Lucas smirked, the expression so startlingly young it made David's chest ache. Sarah would have had a stroke seeing this. The name slipped out easy now, without the flinch that used to follow. The oven timer beeped. Lucas moved to pull out the tray, his birthmark catching the twinkle lights as he bent down. The scar on his temple courtesy of Kessler's men had faded to a thin white line, but David still saw it every time he closed his eyes. 4:33 p.m., the letter. Lucas set 2 mugs of hot chocolate on the coffee table, the marshmallows melting into frothy swirls. She wrote again. He didn't have to specify who. David glanced at the envelope on the counter, the neat prison return address in the corner. Sarah's 3rd letter this month. You don't have to. I know. Lucas sat cross-legged on the floor, the way he used to as a kid. She says the women in her block are teaching her to crochet. Wants to make me a scarf. He huffed a laugh. Like I'd wear that shit. But David noticed the way Lucas tucked the letter carefully into his back pocket instead of tossing it in the trash. 5:12 p.m., the announcement. The local news played quietly on the TVA puff piece about the Carter Foundation for Missing Children, the nonprofit David had launched with his back pay from the wrongful suspension. The screen showed the renovated brownstone downtown, its glass doors etched with a lotus flower design. First of its kind program pairing retired detectives with active cases, the reporter chirped. Lucas muted the TV. You really think this'll help? David studied his son, his kid, alive and breathing and here, and thought of the parents still waiting, the ones who didn't have a crooked adoption file or a distinctive birthmark to follow. It won't bring them all home, he admitted, but it'll make the bastards who took them sweat. Lucas nodded, then reached for the laptop on the coffee table. Then we should add this. He spun the screen around to show a mock-up website, the Lost and Found Project, with side-by-side photos of missing kids and age-progressed renders. David's throat tightened. The banner image was a split screen. Toddler Lucas on the left, 13-year-old Lucas on the right. The caption read, They're out there. Keep looking. 7:59 p.m., the gift. The knock at the door came just as the snow started falling. Lucas answered before David could react, accepting the plain cardboard box from a uniformed courier. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a familiar stuffed dinosaur, Mr. Snappy, missing an eye and crusted with what might have been chocolate or blood. A note in Sarah's careful script. Found him in the attic. You always slept better with this guy, S. Lucas exhaled sharply, his fingers tightening around the toy. David waited for the anger, the outburst, the something. Instead, Lucas just hugged the dinosaur to his chest and muttered, Bitch forgot to wash him. But when he turned back to the tree, David saw it. The way Lucas positioned Mr. Snappy right between the 2 ornaments, bridging the gap. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering the world in quiet. A story that will shatter your heart, then stitch it back together by the final chapter. Did this story leave you breathless? Subscribe now. We drop gut punch stories every day.